an opportunity to tell my co-host, well, we're live, and be all awkward. But I don't know that he's joining today. So my co-host is somebody that I'll introduce in a moment. But it does look like we're in fact live. So I'm going to start my own little watch party here. That's not what I meant to do. So this is the absolute funnest part of the show, as usual. But gosh, this is so weird with a guest and no co-host, how I kick things off. I don't know if you know, Ben, I've been doing this show for every day but 2 days on weekdays for 4 months straight. So yeah, it's I'm a little bit out of my rhythm, but pretty excited. I'm you know what, I'm gonna do the typical thing here where I introduce the show. So
okay, cool.
Let's go ahead and start it with a little bit of, oh my God, this is so awkward. Here we go. Why didn't that didn't work either? Well, Ben, you're gonna have to tell me whether the music comes through, because this is the high production value that you've joined with hotlou Happy Hour.
Should have brought my drink. I still can't hear anything. Oh, I can hear you, but I can't hear any music.
Really? The audio didn't come through?
Nah.
Oh gosh, this is awkward. Normally this is where, yeah.
Go ahead.
This is normally where my co-host helpfully helps me tell me that the audio is not coming through, but we'll forget the music today. I'm just gonna say, welcome to hotlou Happy Hour. I'm your host, Lou Abramowski, or somewhat ultimately known as hotlou. And I'm thrilled today to have somebody I've known for quite a while. He is the reigning 2019 AUDL MVP. So for the viewers who aren't familiar with Ultimate Frisbee, Ultimate Disc, maybe we can get into that a little bit. But suffice to say, it surprises some people that there's a professional Ultimate Disc League. And last year, Ben was voted MVP.
I'm still surprised too, by the way.
I was not. But he also won the college national championship in 2016, right? And then you were a college MVP, or the Callahan Award finalist. It was the following year, right?
2017, yeah.
In 2017, among about 4,000 other amazing accolades over like the last 4 years. So it's been a pretty impressive resume that you've put together in a very limited amount of time. But first of all, let me just say welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lou. It's good to be here. Good to see you.
I was hoping you'd say that. Yeah, it's good to see you too, because we haven't talked in a long time.
Yeah, hardly at all. We've shared random messages here and there, but that's about it.
Yeah, and you know, I think the question that's on everybody's mind right now is, why haven't you joined the world's greatest professional Ultimate team, the Minnesota Windshield?
That is on everyone's mind. I think it just hasn't worked out. I feel a special obligation to refrain from a lot of other sports because I'm getting paid by the New York team, and I just want to make sure that I'm not getting injured. You know, I'd feel really bad if I, before the championship or something, pulled a hamstring at Ultimate, which I do really appreciate the invite every year, but I can't accept, and for the foreseeable future.
Next time we'll send a contract directly to your agent and just negotiate through them.
That's a good idea. We can have our people hash it out.
Yeah. So I've got like 1,000 questions for you, and all of the everybody tuning in, leave your comments in the streams. The easiest way to get a question out is actually watching the stream on the facebook.com/hotlou.com. We're in a couple of the watch parties. So if you got questions, let us know there. But I have some fun stuff and some weird stuff to talk about for the next, 40 minutes or so that we've got. The biggest thing that I think more broadly people are thinking about right now is like this whole, because I've gone through it too, is like, it seems like we've been through like 3 or 4 stops and starts for playing. And like, how can I ask you like how you're dealing with that, like physically, I think a lot of people are in the same camp, excluding like loyal lunatic Brandon Mattis, who is in like the best shape of his life.
Yeah,
Um, I think
that's not
most of
surprising
us,
either.
no, I think most of us are just like struggling with, not being able to see the finish line and what you're training for. And like, then it takes its toll emotionally. Like, how have you been dealing with all of that?
Um, yeah, so I came back for COVID, I don't know, 2.5 months ago or something, with the intent of returning as soon as there's any word from the AUDL that we had to get going again. So I was like ready. I was like running hills 2 or 3 times a week, just ready to crush it. I was feeling in really good shape, and then we got the idea that maybe the bubble was going to happen. And I was like, okay, cool. This is like perfect. I'll be in really good shape. Hopefully, many other people won't be in that good of shape. And then,
Yeah.
like a week after they proposed it, they were like, no, gave it the kibosh and said the season's over. And I think right after that, the club spectrum of Ultimate got the kibosh as well. So Ultimate was dead from that for the summer, competitive at least from that point on. And I was really bummed at first. It was like really kind of ruined what I was expecting to be, a summer of milk and honey. And instead it was, just like hanging out with my family. And the silver lining to it, which I've started to embrace, and I think I've been pretty good at it, is just that I'll get a summer off and I can focus on other things. And I've lost a lot of my imaginative like capability as far as thinking about fun things to do for the summer. Because for the past, 4 or 5 at least, it's just been completely eaten up by got to go to this tournament, then I got to get back for this practice. And it was mostly like finding holes to do like a weekend trip somewhere, or like go hang out at a lake somewhere on a weekend around where I'm supposed to be, rather than like going out on a big camping trip, or doing something for an
Yeah.
extended period of time. So I've been like feeling pretty good, just kind of embracing having a summer off and letting my body rest, because I've been playing nonstop for the past 8 years or something. So
Yeah, I was just about to ask that, and then maybe turn back the clock and we can talk about our history in a
sure.
second. But like, the biggest thing that I noticed that I think a lot of Ultimate players realize is just like, I think we always knew like how much time it was eating up in our life, but we just so casually just say, well, this is the most important part of my life.
Hmm.
Particularly when you've invested so much time in it. And now, kind of oddly, that commitment goes away. And yet filling up the time isn't like what we all think of as like normal people filling up their time. Like going to that wedding, right? Like a wedding that you were kind of on the fence of whether accepting or not, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, I can't do that. I've got a road trip with 2 important games. You're a friend, but you're not that good of a friend.
Yeah.
I've turned down a lot of wedding invitations like that, but because it's COVID, it's also not replacing that. So then we have to get creative and fill in the gaps with something else, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So are you working out at all?
There's a group of people that I've been playing some high level mini with, once or twice a week. But other than that, I've just kind of embraced giving my body a rest. I'm still not like just full on couch potato mode. I'm not like eating whatever I want. I'm paying attention to that, but I've given myself some grace as far as that goes. Just relaxing and not making my life all about being in the best shape of my life. So
Yeah,
maybe for better or
yeah,
for worse.
I hear you. The COVID-19 hit hotlou pretty hard and pretty
Yeah,
quick.
yeah, I'm
Well,
sure.
let's turn back the clock a little bit. So I know your story starting in September of 2013, which I'd like to talk to a little bit
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
I think it's fun.
yeah. I do
I
too.
like bragging about it. Just from a personal standpoint, and actually like witnessing a transformation in you that I'd like to kind of get into. But you'd mentioned that this has been a big part of your life now for 8 years.
Hmm.
2013
Yeah,
was 7 years ago.
yeah,
So can you tell me a little bit about your Ultimate history prior to then?
yeah. So we crossed paths pretty early on after my ultimate journey started. I think I started playing in 2010 in high school. I played with like my church youth group before that, and like the youth pastor was like, "Hey, you're good," and he looked it up and saw that there was a high school league in Minnesota, and he was like, "You should play." So I emailed like the three nearest teams and high school teams, and the first one that got back to me, they said, "Yeah, you can play," because I was homeschooled, so I
Okay.
didn't have a dedicated school to play at. So she said, the coach said, "Yeah, you can play." So I started going to practice, and me and my other homeschool friend, who were both into frisbee, we joined up and played at tournaments and had a great time. And then that year, I realized that there was a YCC group, which is Youth Club Championships, for those of you who aren't aware, which hosts a tournament in Blaine every year for basically like high school all-stars from each state or metro area. And so from there, I played the next year in this I think it's a spring sport, yeah, in high school ultimate, and then I played YCCs that summer. And from that group of friends, I met the Caballeros, which you know, and some of the other folks, Connor Klein. And so
Nice.
then in 2012, I think it was 2012, I played with a different team. And then
Okay.
2013, I played with Imperial,
Right.
which was basically made up of a crew of those YCC fellows that we had such a good time with. And then the well, maybe you want to fill it in, but what happened on from my perspective is we forgot to put in the paperwork for the championship series. So we were basically out, and then you invited like me, or maybe I don't exactly know, but Shirley invited me and a few other of the guys, and we came and played, and we just had like some of the most fun I've ever had playing Ultimate. Just pure fun.
Yeah, can you
Good
tell
time.
me like what you remember about that weekend? Because I'm curious of like how our memory. And let me fill in one quick gap here, because
Yeah.
yeah, as I understand it, you're the Imperial team that I was, kind of involved with
Hmm.
at that point, and had not filled out the paperwork to actually play in the championship series in the fall. I think they did. They just missed the timeline,
The
but
deadline. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the Jesus Jay is in the chat, so maybe he can correct us on that. But the Surly had put in a bid,
Hmm.
not knowing whether or not they were going to go through with it and play with it.
Ah.
And in the end, I think we had like six of us
Okay.
that wanted to play, but
Yeah.
that's clearly not enough to play an entire ultimate tournament. And through, I think, my connection there, also Todd and Winey, who had been helping coach Imperial a little bit too, and John
Hmm.
Sandall
Yeah.
had connected with you guys as well, and we put the teams together into one
Hmm.
team. And I can't even remember. I think we played like we had to play a Surly um,
Yeah.
for that
Yeah.
tournament, and so that's how it all came together. And I think we ended up still with only like 16 or 17 people, which is pretty
Yeah.
pretty thin roster for a tournament in early September. So can you tell me about like what you remember about that sectionals?
Um, yeah, it's pretty limited. So what I remember leading up to it is we Imperial that year had just had like the most fun. We had like parties every other weekend, and we're just like really a good team together. And so from there, and then our practices consisted of like, I don't know, 10 or 12 people showing up a half an hour late. I remember specifically one time I showed up a half an hour late to practice and was like, shoot, sorry guys, I'm going to be late. I was the second person there. Everyone else came strolling up afterwards, flip flops, hats. That was a really fun time. So that was kind of the vibe, but we were good. We went out to Muddy and we like came in second. So
Yeah.
from there, um, it was that was sort of the foundation that I'm remembering is then we took like, 10 or whatever, 6 to 10 of the like core group of dudes that was always playing mini and whatever we were doing at practices and partying together. And we went out and played with you guys. And the combination of young blood of us and heady, older, surly players of all you guys. And, you guys could all still ball. I don't know how that's changed over the last 8 years or whatever. But John and To were still like ripping it and
Oh yeah.
could just keep running. So yeah, I just remember a few of those plays, and I remember specifically one time, I skied the bejesus out of somebody on like a really floaty disc, and all the surly dudes were like, "Hell yeah, brother! Like that's so
I threw
tight."
that disc.
Okay, yeah, and that's when it felt like kind of a melding of like we all felt like on the same team, and it felt like it wasn't just like Surly or just Imperial. It was kind of like Minnesota Ultimate, and you guys were kind of shepherding a lot of us up, and to play better. And I think most of those guys ended up playing Windchill at one point or another, in part
Yeah.
because of that. And maybe you're going to get to this, but I remember that tournament then. You were coaching Winchell the next year, and you were like, "You got to come try out." And I was like, "I don't have $40 to come try out because I'm 19 years old, and I guess it was
Yeah.
probably 18 maybe at that point." And I was like, "I don't
Yeah.
want to pay $40." And you're like, "We got you."
Yeah. Yeah, we followed up with that for sure a little bit later. But yeah,
Okay.
that tournament for me, that was fun because one detail that you're kind of leaving out here is that hodgepodge pickup team between two teams actually ended up winning the section.
Did we? I wasn't sure if we won or if we came in second, but yeah.
We won, and sadly we couldn't get the bodies to go to regionals, so we turned down our
Yeah.
bid to go to regionals.
After winning it,
um,
that's hilarious.
yeah, but to your point, that Imperial team was filled with so many players that then went on to do a bunch of amazing things. It's really interesting to think about you and Connor Klein, Michael Jordan,
Yeah.
Luis Caballero,
Isaac
Brandon
Ruff with a
Mattis,
college championship. Brandon
Isaac
Mattis.
Ruff.
I'm not sure if Brandon was playing at that point. Was he playing in 2013? I may be
That's
mistaken.
you might be right. He might not have been on that team, but I think he's in the chat, so maybe he can jump in
Okay.
and say. Um, but yeah, you stood out to me like immediately as somebody that I just didn't understand why I didn't know about you and I hadn't seen you. But given that you were probably playing on some kind of unknown high school team
Hmm.
at that point, I also, for some reason, I thought you might have been like 20 or 21 and not just like fresh out of high school.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fall, so that like a couple months later, I ended up getting the head coaching job for the Minnesota Windchill.
Hmm.
And you were like one of my first people to reach out to.
Nice.
And in particular, because I knew that you didn't know how good you were.
Mm.
And I think that is that fair to say that you had no idea that you enjoyed playing and you thought you could kind of hang, but I don't think you thought of yourself as somebody that was aspiring to be one of the best in the game, right?
No, I wasn't looking that far ahead by any means. I was just going, this is really fun. And, every time a floaty disc goes up, I seem to be able to come down with it. This is a blast.
Yeah. And I recall that too, because that tournament, I had 0 turnovers, and I think you rescued me on at least 3.
All
And
right, all right.
it's hard to play like a 7-game tournament as a handler and not have any turnovers, and
Yeah,
it helps having a big target like that.
yeah.
Um, and that was one of the reasons that because I knew Windchill would end up being a little bit of the same deal. We were going to have to scrap together as many talented players as we could from all over the place.
Hmm.
And I knew that you were so raw, and you had like, one of the things that jumped out at me almost right away is that you had a natural catchability in all of your throws. And really what I mean by that is you could throw a very stable disc on target that didn't fly at 60 miles an hour. You
Hmm.
could which is something that young players struggle with a lot,
Yeah.
is they can get it on target and flying very stably, but they have to add a lot of velocity. But you had a natural ability to throw kind of a soft forehand 15 feet that was very, very stable. And that's some of the hardest things to teach.
Hmm.
And what kind of followed was, as I tell the story, I like to say that I bullied you into it, and you kind of said kind of the same thing, right? Like, I don't have $40, and I was like, don't worry about the $40. You're coming to tryouts.
Yeah.
And I think, and I when we got to the cut, I can recall even I don't think you made much of an impact during tryouts. And I had to really push the, not quite the owner at the time, but certainly the captains and a handful of the veterans that I was like, this guy needs to play. And sure enough, you did. And what I think is interesting about that season is you had a good season. Not an incredible one, because I think most of the time you were on our third line, and I've got your stats here and I want to compare them to somebody else's here in a second.
Okay.
So I'm going to,
while you're looking that up, I remember my family had gone down to Florida to visit my grandparents for spring break. Right after that, and I got a call from the owner at the time, Santiago, and it was like well after I'd seen everyone else getting invites and everything. So I was like, I'm not going to make it. Like, this sucks. And like, to our point earlier, you said you didn't know how good you were. I was really confident I was good enough to play on that team. Maybe it was misplaced confidence. I'm not really sure. I think pretty clearly not, based on the stats you're about to show. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the reason I want to show these stats, because these are great stats for a rookie, in a pro league. And you were 19 at the time, and that was just, I had no idea. But you played all 14 games that season. You, for the most part, started probably half the season on like the third line. And do you remember if you got bumped up to the starting line towards like the midseason? I think you did, right?
So I think, yeah, I remember my first game. It was a road trip to, I think it was Detroit. We played indoors, and I got like a block and something else as somebody who wasn't on a line, or I was on the third line. And then I remember then after that first game, I started playing more minutes. Like that first game I played, 7 or 8 points maybe, I think. And then I had some pretty good stats, and then you put me in a little more.
Yeah. What I love about your stat line from this rookie season is that you've got 47 goals and you only had 56 completions during the entire season.
Yeah.
And that's like not an accident, right? We had we had a bunch of tall giants on that team, but I should have pulled up Huron's stats and things. Like, he crushed it during those couple seasons.
Yeah.
But for you to be able to complete this, and even in those 56 touches, you still threw 8 goals too, as a 19-year-old rookie with no real experience.
Yeah.
And, at the time I was thinking that there's a good chance, like a couple of games in, that you were going to win Rookie of the Year. And it failed to occur to me that this person won Rookie of the Year. And his stats are pretty amazing. But do you know whose stats these are?
I don't know. Cassidy, or no, I don't know. Oh, Bo. Okay. So I think maybe he won. I don't know.
He won Rookie of the Year that year.
Okay. But he was, I remember seeing those stats, looking at him going like, I have like lots of really great stats. I'm doing really well. And it was cool to be able to see stats. And
right.
I think I was top 10. I've talked about this on like the Empire podcast. I was top 10 in goals and top 10 in blocks.
Yeah.
And not super high up on either of them. But the only other person who was top 10 was Bo. And I didn't know who Bo was at that point. I was like, oh, Bo Kittredge. Maybe I'd heard of him, that he was pretty good or whatever. And I was like, okay, so I should get some press, right? People should be talking about me. Nobody. I didn't get anything, and I was pissed about it. I was like, I look at my stats. Yeah. Come on, people. Including, and it was like a plus 10 or plus 18 or something from that one Detroit game where we were putting a beat down on them.
Yeah, and I loved it and it felt like such a ripoff. And I don't know if you've ever talked, because now you and Bo are teammates. Have you guys ever talked about the fact that he started playing, effectively, like, I think probably that he was probably like 29 years old at the time.
Yeah.
Or maybe not 29. I think he was like actually in his early 30s when that happened. But he was clearly established.
He's like 37 right now. So yeah, he was probably 31.
31. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, for him to be more or less still in his prime, to come into the league, and already be recognized as one of the best players in the league, felt so unfair to you for me. Like on your behalf, I was upset for you
Yeah.
because it felt like such a ripoff. And I've told that story now for 6 times. Have you and Bo ever talked about this?
No, Bo is not one to care about stats at all. He probably was like, I have no idea how many goals or anything. I was not, he had probably won 4 or 5 national championships and two World Games titles and 4 other World
Yeah.
Championship titles. He doesn't care about a few AUDL stats, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting because I feel like there's, despite your accomplishments in this little bit of time that you've been playing, I feel like you've had a handful of weird snubs that just didn't, just somehow, some way you got robbed. And I'm going to say that I think you got robbed in 2014 because it felt like such a weird thing because it's not like Bo was a true rookie.
Yeah.
Not only did he play, basically coming in still in his prime, but he also got to play with people he'd been playing with forever.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then the other snub that I thought was a little bit more recent that I thought was kind of interesting, and I'd love your take on this. But and maybe it's not fair, but maybe you saw the Ultiworld's top 10 North American men's players of the 2010s.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to look at this list?
I did.
Yeah.
Those are all phenomenal players.
They are. Do you feel like you belong in the list of these 10 guys?
No, I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah,
I know
well, it's of the decade too. And in my
right.
my rise has been, in the last 4 or 5 years that maybe people have known me. So yeah, these guys are all insane. They're all so good.
They're all amazing. They're all amazing.
So if I had this, if the past 4 years, carry out for the next 8 or something, I'm not even sure I'll be playing at that time, then maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I've also realized the sort of hollowness in a lot of personal accolades. The AUDL MVP was something that was really cool for me because it felt like a validation for like myself, but also my parents and my grandparents. They're all big fans, and it was cool. My dad's a huge like sports guy, and he was able to do that and see that. So that was like a really cool validation. But at the same time, like I see team success as so much more valuable and important. So, and I know like Jimmy would feel the same way after playing, he that's probably cool, but I don't know. The big snub for that list is Chris Kotcher. Chris Kotcher should be, he's one of the best players ever. He's so sick.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I guess the point I was making, and your modesty aside, like, if you could extend those, project those 5 years out to 10, I think you're clearly in that list. But that's kind of the point that I'm making is these snubs that have happened. Not that it's been universal, but this falls under one of those categories too, where it's just odd set of circumstances. In another case, if you, if you'd have gotten a couple more years in that group, it seems like it's a lot easier to put you in that same category, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but I'm with you, man. Chris Kocher for sure. Like, what a talent! And so let's talk about all of your New York Empire teammates for a second, because it's not just, and your coaching staff for that matter, right? Like the whole organization, like I don't know the owners, but from secondary accounts, it seems like everybody involved is just super hyper committed to excellence. And am I just projecting that based on the success that you guys have had, or do you feel that?
No, I definitely feel that. Like the whole New York community, I think, has seen a huge boon, in part because of the Empire, but also because of the really high quality, devoted people involved in coaching in club for Pony, and then also for Empire. Like the owners are great for Empire, and they breed sort of this excellence mentality, and they want to do the best they can. And it doesn't always turn out that way. Like, it doesn't always turn out to be the best, but they are trying their best. And I don't think anyone who's ever played for them would say otherwise. At least under the leadership organization that I've been under. So Brian Jones is one of the best coaches out there. I I don't know if you know how meticulous he is or if that's well known to everyone else, but
It's not well known, but I've picked up on it listening to a couple of his interviews.
yeah, he is a phenomenal frisbee mind. We have a video for the in our pony group me from in 2018 when we won nationals. Actually, he was it was like after we had won quarters against Machine, just barely squeaked it out. He was sitting in the hot tub that evening, all of his clothes on, watching his phone, watching film against Sockeye, for the next day. Just
Yeah.
he's just like, I don't know the comparison to draw, but he is just like single track minded, like just obsessive to the nth degree about Ultimate, and he's really good at it. And then same with BVH.
Yeah.
BVH is also a phenomenal leader and strategist and everything, for Pony
Yeah.
too. And I've just gotten to see BJ Brian Jones for
Hmm.
Empire and Pony, which has been nice.
Yeah, that is really cool. So, I think the big question that I have on this is one of the things that I love about Ultimate, and, personally, I have fallen in love with Ultimate more than like the height of my Ultimate.
Okay.
And one of the cool things about Ultimate is that and maybe you've picked up on it because I know you play a little bit, right?
Hmm.
That city to city, the styles are so different. And it seems like most people in a city play by that like similar style. And it really, like, you really, really see it at the national championships that have happened the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Whereas, with Ultimate, I think there are styles and there's, differences, but like at the differences are really in the fine details. They're not like overarching philosophical huge differences, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody's still just like on offense trying to create space,
Hmm.
and be possession oriented. And on defense, you're trying to, create blocks and generate pressure. Whereas like Ultimate's very much different. But that said, I do find that Minneapolis has at least a cultural, uh, some like there's a cultural common thread that goes through a lot of the teams. Um,
Mm.
and there's a sense of like community and things, but from the philosophy of like, uh, excellence and, wanting to, uh, go win championships, there's a little bit of an absence of that, short of maybe like Dragon Thrust and maybe like the Minnesota Grey Duck, right?
Hmm.
But now that you've played for New York and you have a coach who is as meticulous as you've described, and I've traded a couple conversations with BVH too, and I've picked up on, that similar style with him too. Are you now seeing like these like stark differences in either philosophy or style, like city to city, or like what was the biggest shift as you got to New York, as a player and like a member of the community?
That's I like all that whole thread of ideas. So I'll start off by saying when I was involved in Minnesota Ultimate, I wasn't nearly as interested or involved with the strategy aspect of it. So I can't really speak to that as well. Just because I've done a lot of maturing in the New York Ultimate setting, so I could tell you what they are like, and then maybe if I came back, then I would be able to offer more insight and into what their sort of overarching strategies are. But yes, like a commitment to excellence is a point you touched on, and like to winning a championship, which is it's something I've noticed is like much different for a team that's trying and striving to win a championship than it is a team that's like hoping to get to semis and maybe the cookie crumbles the right way. It was just the expectations for preseason work, for out of season work, for um, practices and the intensity of practices. It's all elevated to another level from. And again, I'm not sure what the culture is on like Sub-Zero nowadays or like wind chill nowadays, but when I was there, it wasn't as serious, and I'm sure it would have been serious on dragon thrust, because those people, they have 3 championships in a row. There's, they knew what it took to win. Um, and I'm not sure, yeah, if those dragon thrust guys who were playing on Winchell when I was there were striving and really frustrated with the fact that we weren't able to get that same intensity, or what. We'd have to talk to Strings or Neil.
I've got some thoughts on that, but yeah, keep
Yeah.
going.
So yeah, I don't really know what those guys were thinking, but there's definitely a shift. As far as strategy, which again I'm not really sure. It's funny because it's prevalent in Ultimate on the grass field. Uh, those differences are prevalent or noticeable when you look at it compared to country. So like Japanese have
Oh,
a
yeah.
really specific style,
Right.
and the South Americans or Colombians have a really specific style. The Europeans have a very specific style. The American Ultimate is very specific, and it's helped
Yeah.
us. And maybe other teams will adopt it, or maybe teams will or other countries and whatever regions will hone theirs to be more like Americans, because it seemed to have had the most success thus far, or maybe they'll just hone theirs to become better. So I'm not really sure about that. But as far as Goaltimate, again, I don't really know that culture very well, but I can imagine it's because it's like relatively underdeveloped, and these things sort of evolve in a very like compressed sphere of influence. So then these tendencies tend to happen for Goaltimate, where they aren't able to see other strategies, and now with Goaltimate Nationals they'll probably end up people adopting, oh, like short upside down
Yeah.
throws are much better than otherwise.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I guess what I'm hearing, and I hadn't really thought of this before, is, with North American Ultimate, you see so much play between the teams that teams get to see the different strategies that are successful. And then they can either copy them or adopt them or iterate off of it. You don't see that in Ultimate at all, right?
Yeah.
Like there's you play in your own city, everybody basically plays the same. And so it's interesting. But like I guess my question is
Can I just interrupt you there too?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Pony fell fell to that last year at Nationals in 2019, because in 2018 we BJ specifically kind of developed this really switchy, saggy defense that got tons of blocks and
Yeah.
won us a national championship game with ease.
Yeah.
Against
Yeah,
Revolver, who was
Mm-hmm.
obviously one of the best teams of the decade.
Right.
And then we on Pony didn't really expect to run into it the same way that Chicago dealt it to us, and we couldn't hang with them this year. We kind of got embarrassed, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
I think that evolution sort of happens, and people are able to see, and then Chicago adopted it and tweaked it a little bit, and then set it loose on us, and it works, which is cool to see from a 10,000 foot level, but obviously not for me personally.
Well, I think that's, it's funny that you say that, because one of the observations that I've made about Dragon Thrust is they've failed to make that same evolution, because, when they won their back-to-back-to-back national championships, they were really relying on an enormous amount of athleticism and just big plays. And they could get away with that in the mixed division back then. But what's interesting that's happened really since their last championship in the mixed division is there are now 8 teams that have that same level of athleticism and skill, where, during their run, there was maybe one other, and it was like mixtape. And they just didn't do it as well as Dragon. And that that failure to evolve over the last like 3 years and still use that similar style kind of caught up with them until last year. They still started to evolve a little bit and recognize it. But I guess my question, like related to styles here, is like, was it hard for you to transition when you went to New York, or was it something that you were craving and missing because you had won a national championship with Minnesota Ultimate, University of Minnesota at the college level, which in my opinion is the men's college championship is the hardest to win of all the championships.
Yeah.
I'd like your take on that too. But was that something you were craving and it was welcome, or was it hard and you're like, oh, I have to work extra hard to fit in New York?
Um, I I wouldn't say it was that hard. Like I said, my ultimate acumen was relatively underdeveloped at that point. So
Sure.
I was just like sort of going off of skill and athleticism and hoping it would carry me through, and it did pretty well. But I've done a lot of evolving once I got to New York, and I think, you know, if you'd asked me to coach a team, a high school team or college team back then, I wouldn't have been any good at it. But
Yeah.
now I think I would have a lot of valuable strategic, pointers and ways that I could maybe tweak that would be really helpful because I've seen a lot of them at play, and I've been attuned to that sort of shift or those little developments.
Yeah. And I have to imagine now, if you were to end up on a team or a city where you didn't have that excellence, I imagine it would feel like frustrating, right?
I think it would be pretty frustrating, and like like we were saying, I'm not sure if those Dragon guys thought it was really frustrating when we didn't have it on Windchill or what, but it's kind of an intangible that is hard to manufacture.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good kind of transition into the next kind of question that I have on this, because I think what was really happening there is that the AUDL for them was an opportunity to fine tune a handful of skills. It wasn't really about the excellence
Mm,
or, building a championship culture, because I'll tell you, like, my priority in everything that I did for those 3 years that I was the coach is I was like, we need to slowly build on layers towards a championship without any foundation. Like, we were so far away when we started. And then three
yeah.
years later, with a skeleton crew, we nearly win a playoff game.
Hmm.
And, and ironically enough, the Dragon Thrust players didn't show up for that game. And because they had their retreat that weekend. But that was like the
Oh,
evidence, if you recall, that uh, their commitment to the excellence of their club team was 10 times more important than the most important thing happening in the AUDL, because a
sure.
retreat to just be with their teammates was more important than the first playoff game.
Mm,
And there was, I think, really up until um, I'd say maybe 2017, 2018 in the AUDL, you felt that from all but a handful of the AUDL teams, even from the outside.
hmm.
Uh, but now, you know, you see these club teams kind of forming, even loose relationships with their city's AUDL team.
Hmm.
And, you guys had an incredibly dominant season last year with the Empire, New York
Hmm.
Empire. The overlap on the Pony roster and the Empire roster was 90%, it
What? I don't think it was that high.
wasn't that high.
I,
Okay.
I don't I don't think so. It was I point well taken, but continue.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess so like, what was um, so you guys just dominate, and like, that Empire team, in my opinion, was like built to dominate the AUDL. You've got a handful of people who are just never going to turn it over, and then a couple of players complementing them that are just going to make massive, huge plays. You've got Harper Garvey throwing it like crazy. You've got Ben Yacht making acrobatic, catches while the disc flutters in the air for goals in
Yeah.
the playoffs, right? You
Yeah.
have Grant Lindsley, who's going to do Grant Lindsley things. Uh, Connor Klein's going to score a million goals. I could just go on and on,
Jack
but
Williams, Jeff Babbitt. Yeah.
I
The whole
mean,
crew, the Dross, everyone.
yeah,
Lamar.
I
Yeah.
mean, Babbitt is just like, yeah. So you just have like,
Insane.
you had every tool at your disposal, both proactively and reactively, for, I think, an ultimate field that is the size of a football field.
Hmm.
So then you go towards the club championship too, and probably feeling pretty confident, having just won the club championship the year before, but then you're transitioning from AUDL to USAU Club
Hmm.
Ultimate. Was that was that do you think there were elements of the AUDL in the preparation from the AUDL standpoint that you guys may have struggled with a little bit, or was it more about the evolution stuff that you'd mentioned?
No, I'm not really sure if that was a big problem because like I said, the overlap wasn't maybe as high as you would think. Like Jimmy Mickle, Chris Kotcher, Sean Keegan, all didn't
Jack
play.
Williams,
Jack Williams played for Raleigh,
right?
Ring of
So those
Fire,
guys all didn't
so
play.
he
Yeah,
didn't play. So one thing I will say for the AUDL, the Empire, we won a bunch of games by like very small margins. So we did, win, and we were able to, push through when it mattered. But it, I'm not sure that we dominated maybe as much as you're making it seem. We did know to turn it on when we needed to turn it on. Like we were confident we were going to make a deep playoff run. Um, but maybe some of that focus waxed or waned a little bit earlier on. I will say, back to the comparison between AUDL and USAU. In AUDL, I think it's relatively easy to kind of brute force. We're just going to out talent you. There's tons of big space on the field. We got big throwers. We got big catchers. We're just gonna beat you athletically, and we're gonna win it because the field is so big. In USAU, the field's a little smaller, or quite a bit smaller, and once you're playing on it, it feels a lot smaller. But dimensions wise, it's not like horrible. The difference is it's a little more nuanced. So like I said, these defensive, sorry, these defensive strategies can come into play a little easier with switches and athleticism. You don't need to be like just a hound dog on defense because
right.
you just end up being closer to them just by the nature of the field. So I think that was maybe a problem with transitioning over, and where like we were kind of used to brute forcing it in AUDL and it became a little more nuanced. And then the other thing is our offense just felt a little wacky for quite a bit of the year that I was practicing with Pony, and me and Jeff and Ben Katz didn't play. We didn't practice with Pony until the Empire season was over because of the concerns about injury and stuff that I had mentioned before. So that might have added to it, but I think there's probably something a little more at the heart of the issue rather than just me and Jeff and Katz not playing. I just felt like our defense would just like crush us at practices all the time, which is a testament to how good our defense was. But when you think about our
Oh
offense, we
wow.
had me, Jimmy Mickle, Chris Kotcher, Grant Lindsley, Sean Keegan, Harper Garvey, and like William Dean or Alex Thorne.
Yeah.
Those guys all have many championships between them, and I think
Yeah.
6 of us have made the world's team now, and some of them multiple. So we shouldn't have had any problems, but our defense was just crushing us at practices. Anyway, we're getting into the weeds, but it felt just a little off, and I don't know what tweaks could have been made to fix that, but
Yeah, but that's a
water under
good
the
point
bridge.
because the offense has every advantage in Ultimate. I mean, every advantage, right? And unless you're layering on some weather too, when you're talking about the skills that the players that you just described have, the offense should be crushing at practice. And yeah, I guess you probably weren't like hitting like the pause button over on AUDL and then like the resume button in USAU and then flipping back and forth. You had a pretty clean cut, it sounds like,
Yeah.
at the beginning of August that year, and you still had 2 months and change to kind of transition.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's talk about world stuff. So that's got to be hard, man.
Yeah.
Are you like, do you know anything about like what the plans are? Have they said anything about like whether there's going to be another tryout, presuming the tournament tries to resume next year? Do you have any idea?
I don't think there's gonna be another tryout. The last I heard, which was 2 months ago at this point, was that the organizing committee WIFDIF for Worlds was going to try to get, I think 85 teams have to commit for them to rerun the tournament again in next year, summer of next year.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that turns out. I think that's across all of the divisions is 85. So at first I was like, oh, it's for sure going to happen. And now as I'm thinking about it, it's like, oh, I don't know. That is quite a bit of teams that have to re-up for this this thing. So again, that one also making the world's team felt like a validation for my grandparents. Again, both my grandfathers and my dad all served in the military, so it was cool to
Oh,
sort of
wow.
represent the country in something totally different from what they had
Yeah.
represented. But that felt cool. So that would felt like a validation, and I was initially pretty bummed that I wasn't going to play, and it's sort of been a plateau of just like I would really like to compete at that level, and frankly, the practices leading into it would have probably been the most enjoyable part because you get 2 or 3 good games maybe at a world's level being of this
Yeah.
caliber playing Canada or Japan or Colombia maybe, and but the practices I would have loved to just you know have Dylan guarding me or Raider guarding
Exactly.
me, and
Yeah.
scoring on them would have been tight, and getting scored
Yeah.
on by them I would have been mad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that would have been a blast. So maybe we can, even if it doesn't happen, maybe we can go and have like a little world's party and play some frisbee and do some
Yeah.
hanging out.
I guess that's a really interesting point that I hadn't considered is like even it's not just worlds, but it's also like club. Like you're playing with an incredibly talented roster, but you're not talking about the caliber, the talent density that you would have at a world's practice. And not only that, but the serious, not that you don't take your club practices or your ADL practices seriously now, but the people who are on that team, none of them ever take a minute off, whether it's practice or whatever. So even at a practice, you guys were probably going to be going like one of the hardest games of your life would be just like a practice.
Yeah, no, I think there's a good chance that those practices, scrimmages, whatever, leading up to Worlds between the national team itself would have probably been some of the most intense frisbee maybe to ever happen, or some of the best, highest quality offense and defensive frisbee to ever happen on planet Earth, which would have been a really exciting experience to be a part of. But
yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, I played a couple of points in that 2016 AUDL playoff game out of necessity.
yeah,
And, uh, and, the, it was interesting. I don't remember anything about the interview except for the host there turned to me and said, like, he asked me some question and I was like, I didn't even hear you because I need to let you know I've been playing Ultimate for 17 years, 16 years, 17 years. And like, it's been my dream to play in a stadium and have replays going on the scoreboard here. Right.
yeah,
And I got to imagine, because I've met your dad several times and he is like he's got to be your number one fan. And like all of that stuff just has to like, you are living the dream, I think, of what like people in the 2000s always wished, because you're getting like legitimacy, both appearing on, national televised sports things. I gotta imagine you're signing autographs after games too, right?
yeah. And the culmination of my career, I'm on the hotlou happy hour. Like, this is insane.
I don't mean to brag, Yacht, but if we want to talk about snubs here, I have to be the only player in AUDL history with a minimum number of games and being undefeated in the regular season.
All right. Respect, you gotta put some respect on the name. You got it.
I also have 100% completion rate on my hucks because all 100% of them went to a guy named Ben Jagt.
Well, you know your target. That's good.
Yeah, it was 1 for 1. Well, this was fun, dude. Thanks for hopping on. Really, like you said, the culmination of everything in your career leading up to this great moment.
Time is a flat circle. Started with you. Hopefully, we'll end with you. But it's good to be back.
All right, you'll be back after you've won a world championship, I hope. Is there anything else on the bucket list that the ultimate fans out there might want to be able to help you out with, whether it's trick shots or championships or personal accomplishments?
If anyone knows how to highline out there, I would enjoy starting to highline a little bit. That sounds pretty
Okay.
cool. But other than that, no, I'm living life. I'm having a good time with it.
Awesome. Well, I'm rooting for you for a world championship. Um, I guess I'll end with like, are you do you do anything like, do you want people to follow you on social media? I think you're kind of buttoned up, right? You keep it pretty, you keep your inner circle pretty tight, it seems like.
Yeah, I've been wishy-washy on if I should even have Facebook or Instagram anymore, but I don't know. If people want to see my once in every 6 months post on Instagram, you can go follow me there. I think it's like Ben Yacht, Ben underscore Yacht, or I don't care. If you want to follow me, follow me. If you don't,
Yeah.
do your life.
There we go. Well, let's show one of your posts.
Okay.
We might as well, right? This is it, right?
Let me see.
Do you recognize
Yeah, that's
this?
me. That's me. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a look here. So it's replaying, but in case you didn't see, Ben threw up the disc, ran through the house, and caught it on the other side.
So funny, actually, we talked about you had Isaac Saul on your show last week, and I posted one earlier that I think Empire and maybe Alti World reposted, and it was me going through the house and the video of me running through the house and catching on the other side. And Isaac Saul's girlfriend said, "That's fake. That's probably fake." And I said, "Phoebe, you know what? I'm just gonna do it again just for you." It took me 3 tries. I hoisted my little brother up on the roof and said, "All right, film." Threw it over, caught it, and I pointed at the camera later, but I said, "Take that, Phoebe. That's for you."
Perfect. I tried to track down the other one, but I don't know. I need to be better at the internet, I guess. Yeah. Well, if you're not going to connect with Ben on social media, I'm going to recommend everybody go out there and start following the American Ultimate Disc League on, I think their Instagram is dope, right? Like the highlight clips, it's a continuous barrage of like high production value, highlight clips, which are awesome. I love the Harper Garvey and Jeff Babbitt ones. No disrespect to you, but those
I'm with you there too. I think I look kind of dopey playing frisbee, and those Harper can throw it a million miles, and Jeff is more athletic than anyone playing the game right now. So it makes sense.
Yeah, gosh, I keep wanting to talk, but I know you got to go.
Let me ask what time is it? We got a few more minutes. Yeah,
we got a few more minutes. Okay, so I can't remember. Did you play in the Pittsburgh game that Tyler DiGirolamo came back? And no, you weren't?
No. Okay. I think I was still doing college at that point. I got back and Sam Reese guarded him. And he was probably 19 or 20 at that time too. And he was like, This dude is a monster. That's the best frisbee player I've ever seen play. And just throwing hammers. I remember watching the highlights, just going, I can't watch this anymore. It was just him and Alex Thorne just shredding us.
Well, you might recall that you don't, because I think were you on the sideline, or were you maybe out after a tournament or something?
I don't think so. I don't remember what the circumstances were exactly, but I don't think I was there.
In any case, my whole directive to everybody on the team was, because Tyler was still early in his career. Like, you guys are kind of not far off from each other.
He's pretty fresh out of dominating college. Yeah.
Yeah. And his college domination, I got to, see it with my own eyes, because that was in Madison, Wisconsin. Most of what he did there was catch it and then just dump to somebody else, and then he would go score. And he wasn't very confident as a thrower, and still hadn't been. So my directive was, look, I don't care how Tyler beats us, but he's not going to score 15 goals on us. Let's just keep him in the middle of the field and see what happens. He set the AUDL record for assists that game.
Yeah. I think he still has some of the highest assists per game stats out there. He was like on. He was great.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, like, just watching that whole path, that 2-year path, I don't know that I've seen a player like him. I mean, I share Sam's take on it. I don't know that I've seen a player be that dominant, and just have once he got able to throw and have all of the throws too. Like, I just don't know that we've seen a player like that in that like short amount of time, because he was huge, athletic, had every throw.
Yeah.
What so I have to ask, I guess, because I guess I'm kind of saying he's the best ultimate player I've seen, at least in that short little stint there. Who's the best ultimate player you've played with or seen or whatever, if you want to compliment
Yeah.
someone?
I think these, well, there's two of them I think that come to mind is Jimmy and Chris. Jimmy Mickle and Chris Kocher. I didn't get to see Bo in his prime really, so I've watched some videos now and go like, holy cow, this dude was insane.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories, but personally, in my experience, yeah, Jimmy and Chris coming off of their stay in Australia, they were in insane shape. Jimmy has throws like Harper, but he's stuck in a 230-pound frame. Sorry, Jimmy, if you weigh less than that. He's a muscular 210 maybe.
Yeah, but he gets
And
up.
then yeah, and then Chris is just somebody who will never stop. And on Pony, we would just say, if he's playing D line, just hold him out of the goal until Chris can get a block, because it will happen at some point. It's a numbers game with Chris getting a block, and it's going to happen. So I think those two are probably the best. They're maybe not quite as like jaw dropping as Tyler D was at that point, but yeah, Chris is just insane. And then Jeff too. Jeff is
Yeah.
the most athletic frisbee player in the game right now, and I think that's without question. And it's probably by a pretty significant margin.
Yeah, I think we're like 1 or 2 years away from teams not being able to be successful without having like 2 or 3 guys like a Jeff on their team. They're going to need a huge muscular dude that can get it done and that can get up off the ground. Is hard to get around. Windchill were lucky and Dragon Thrust were fortunate to have Haran like
Yeah,
that back in the day,
yeah,
because he was a little bit like that. But now you see teams adopting that, whereas like it's awesome to have a 6'5", 6'6" guy like yourself, huge target. But sometimes the combination of like, you don't want to guard Thorn, right? Like
no,
trying to like keep up with his speed, but Babbitt could probably guard Thorn, right?
yeah,
And
probably
have
he's
like,
more agile and faster. Yeah, probably.
yeah. And I think we're going to see this transition where teams are going to start having like 2, 3 guys, like a big, thick dude that's strong and athletic, and not just like a U, where teams are just try to fill up with as many like long guys who can kind of do everything.
Yeah, I would say a counterpoint to that is I think it's probably further than a few years away, and my guess is once the league starts making more money and people realize that they can make a career out of this, because Jeff and I like really like Ultimate, despite maybe being a little um, uh, less outspoken about it, we really enjoy playing it. But I think Jeff could probably be playing another sport at some semi-professional level at least. So we've seen guys like former D1 athletes come and play Ultimate, and they just don't have the skills to do it. And so until kids who are young enough to transition to Ultimate start seeing that they can make a living out of it, or maybe make a better living than they would otherwise playing Ultimate early enough for them to transition to it, I don't think it's going to happen. So maybe a grain of salt for that. That's just my take too.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe it is closer or farther away, but you jogged a memory, and I don't know how to ask this without sounding insulting, so forgive me. But the end of your season, the end of your AUDL season in 2018 was kind of this heartbreaking loss where you had a dominant first half performance, right? And you might recall Jeff got hurt because somebody made this like incredibly reckless play,
Yeah.
and had no opportunity to play on it. And then Jeff couldn't really play the rest of the game. And it shocked me listening to, I think Lepler and Ian Toner were doing the game, and maybe Meagles. It shocked me that they were just like, you might remember this because I'm sure you've watched the game, but like okay, well, the second half of the game, they kind of kept saying like, where Yacht had this incredible first half performance, but like in the second half, he's just not being nearly as dominant. And I'm like, how do you guys miss that? This like
Jeff.
one of the greatest athletes to ever play the game is playing O-line part-time now.
Yeah.
Whereas he was like absolutely crushing prior to that. Was that going through your mind at the time of the game? Do you remember it all?
I kind of just black out when I'm playing, and I just remember it afterwards. But it certainly has a role to play in it, like without a doubt. If Jeff plays that whole game, he's a 3-point difference maker at least.
Yeah.
And so that was tough. I will say we kind of felt like it was just a blessing to be there anyway. So
sure.
It wasn't like as heartbreaking as you might imagine, because I think we were at like, I don't know, 6-4 or 4-6 early in the season, and we were like, we have to win all of our games to make the playoffs, and we did. And then we beat, DC in this crazy rainy game, and then we beat Toronto in this game that was like the first time we'd ever beat them, insane. And then we got to that game, and we gave Dallas just about as much as they could handle. I think we scored 65 goals or something between the two teams, which is an insane amount of goals if you're not familiar with Ultimate.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of work under those circumstances. It was really hot too. So we were kind of like, we were bummed. It would have been nice to make a championship game, but I think it probably set us up pretty well mentally for the following season and winning last year. We were all pretty hungry.
But I'm with you. I've told people, like, I think if Babbitt doesn't get hurt in that game, you guys win the AUDL championship as the Empire and then follow it up with the club championship. So it's really unfortunate.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, you're young, dude. So is your team, as a matter of fact.
We got time.
Yeah, you got time. And I think there's opportunity, even with 2020 being the COVID winter of discontent. For everybody that, the talent, the youth, the commitment to excellence. I think there's even like the accomplishments that you and your team have had already. I think in the future is bright. There's a lot of great stuff in your future still, man.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be following along. We'll smash the like button. We'll also remind people to follow the AUDL on Instagram, on Facebook. Like the highlight videos are amazing. And if you're not familiar with Ultimate, I think it's a game built for highlights. So even if you don't understand the game, you can really appreciate it for all of the highlight stuff.
While you're at it, go follow the PUL too. There's a lot of cool women highlights out there as well. They're good too. It's really fun to see those. Just as sweet of plays, I think, a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, and okay, I keep trying to close this off, but now you triggered this too, because I've had some amazing conversations with some women who play Ultimate who have been crushing it in the game for a long time. And now I think over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen talent density in the women's game improve to the fact that, this isn't a slight on women. It's a slight on the women's game not having the same opportunities, and as a result, not having the same talent density through coaches and experience and blah, blah, blah. But now that there's been so much work put into that over the last 10 years, we're seeing like 25 players on Fury who can huck it and get these amazing layout Ds. And then you've got some amazing coaches in the women's game too, that are like laying on these amazing, what appear to me to be more like team oriented types of strategies. Whereas, and I think that's the only way to win in the women's game. Whereas like, 8-9 years ago, sometimes, a team with like 3 good players could get up and start making appearances in the semis. That's just not true in the women's game anymore. And you're going to see, I think her name's Beth Kaler from Fury, do a shoulder high layout catch.
Claire Chastain making a crazy layout D, layout catch. Yeah.
Robin
sick.
Fennig, Octavio, right? But it's just like
Sarah Griffith.
constant. Yeah. Like if you're not watching the women's game right now, use that as an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the game, because I think there's far more finesse and team-oriented stuff happening there across the board. Not to say that that's not happening in the men's game, but the men's game, there's going to be 8 points a game where it's like there's a pull play and a score, next point. That doesn't happen quite as often in the women's game because they're out there like actually executing on the team strategy really, really well. So let's wrap it up. We've taken enough of your time. It's been awesome talking to you, dude.
Yeah, likewise, Lou. It's been fun.
Yeah, we'll get a Goaltimate game going as socially distant and or mask wearing as we can. Maybe before you head back to New York, and we'll get the agent on the phone to get you signed for the Minnesota windshield.
Yeah, perfect. I'll have my people talk to yours.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share with everybody?
No, thanks for having me on, Lou.
Yeah, thanks. We'll do it again. We'll do it again after you've had a world championship. Sound good?
Yeah. Let me know.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. This has been Hot Lou Happy Hour. I am your host, Hot Lou, and we will talk to you very soon.